Being a married soldier in the United States Army is a little bit different than what it's like to be a single soldier in the United States Army. And if you're someone who is going to be joining the Army and you are married, or maybe it could happen and you meet that special someone while you're serving the United States Army, you might want to know what that lifestyle is like in the Army. And that's what I want to explain today, and that video starts right now. Now, I did cover this topic a while back on this channel, and I wanted to do a new updated version, not because it's different really necessarily, but I probably feel like I can probably cover it a little bit better than I did back like 6 years ago when I made the original video that talked about what it was like being in the Army as a married soldier, and maybe answer some things that, some questions I've gotten from people, right? People in the comments asking, what's this like? What's that like? Maybe try to answer those hopefully in this video. So here we go. I'm gonna be talking about what that lifestyle is like if you're a married soldier in the Army. Now, for you single individuals, well, don't worry, I am going to be doing one for those individuals, so be sure you're subscribed because you wanna know about it, right? You wanna be able to get that alert and be able to click on that video and then comment first and be that first one or whatever, right? You wanna be there, you wanna be informed about what it's like being a single soldier in the Army. I'm gonna do a video on that as well, so make sure you're subscribed. In fact, there could be a possibility that that video is already out, and if so, a card pops up. But if not, well, then it's coming soon. Now, in today's Army, you can be married to the opposite sex or the same sex. It's not like it was back in the early 2000s and the 90s when you had the don't ask, don't tell policy they had in the Army. In today's Army, you're allowed to be married to the same sex, opposite sex, whatever you want to do. Now, you do have to prove that marriage through legal forms to have the legal document to say that I am married. It doesn't count if you're common law married or you did a special ritual that said that you guys are married because you went to this website online, whatever, right? You got to be legal, all right? So it's got to have an official document of some sort that is a legal document that is recognized by the United States military to say that, yes, I am married to this individual. If you have that legal document, you get to enroll that individual into a bunch of benefits and everything for that spouse to be able to take advantage of the benefits that you get from being married to a soldier. So they kind of like register into the system, so that way they can get like an ID card, so that way they can get access to base, they can, shop at the commissary, they can shop at, the PX on post, all sorts of stuff, and get those same benefits to include even like health care and everything, to be able to go to the hospital on base and everything. So if you get married while in the Army or you're already married, you just got to make sure that individual gets enrolled into all the process. That way they get all those benefits, the ID card and everything. Now, if your spouse is not a US citizen, they still do qualify for those benefits. There are some extra things you have to do to make sure that you're not married to a spy or something like that, right? But nonetheless, even if that individual is not a US citizen, because maybe you're not a US citizen yet, you're just a green card holder and you joined the military, or you met that individual overseas or whatever the case was, and now your spouse is not a US citizen, you can still, be able to get those benefits for that spouse and everything. You just got to make sure that there's might be some additional things they have to do to go do a background check or whatever. Like I said, you just want to make sure that that's not a spy that's trying to take advantage of you and get some kind of high-speed government secrets from you. But that marriage does still need to be documented. It has to be in some kind of documentation that is legal, that is recognized by the United States military. It can't be something where, oh, well, because in their country we passed under the water fault under a full moon that made us married. No, it's not gonna work that way. It's gotta be a legal document that the military recognizes. Now, if you're a married soldier on active duty, you can't live in the barracks, all right? There was a time in the Army where that was allowed. This was called a geo-bachelor. If you had a situation where you're a soldier on active duty, you're married, but your spouse does not want to be stationed there, right? Maybe you got stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, and you're like, Kansas sucks. My wife, my husband, whatever, does not want to come to Kansas. They want to stay in Texas, California, whatever, and I'm just stuck on my own. Well, then they would let you stay in the barracks. You still got to collect that, basic allowance, for housing and subsistence, and I'm gonna talk about a little bit later on, to help pay for rent for your spouse back home. That's no longer the case. The Army doesn't recognize geo-bachelors anymore, so if your spouse does not want to be with you at your duty assignment or wherever that's located at, you still can't live in the barracks. You're gonna have to either still go live off post or get on post housing, and they are going to pay you that rate for the location that you're at, and you're just gonna have to suck it up and I guess pay 2 rents, right? 2 mortgages, whatever the case is. They don't do GO bachelors anymore in the United States Army. Now, married soldiers do have the option to choose if they want to live on base or off base. Now, on base, that's housing, right? They have some military housing, Army housing they have on post, and dependent on like what your rank is, the size of your family, will depend on how nice or not nice, those housing quarters might be. I will say that probably if you're like an E2 and you have no kids, it's kind of like a small little apartment kind of a thing, maybe like a duplex type of scenario in a lot of cases, dependent on the location you're stationed at. And then once you do move up in rank, or if you have a larger family, then they have to provide you with a available home that has more rooms, and those ones are pretty nice. But that is going to be based on availability, right? If they don't have the availability for your rank, for the size of your family, or just in general, they don't have any available on-post housing, then you have to go on a waiting list. And that waiting list could take several months. It could just never come. You could end up leaving and going somewhere else before you even become available on there. And in that case, or if you don't want to live on post, then you got to get a place off post. That's on you, right? You just got to find yourself an apartment, a house to rent. If you want to try to purchase a house, some people like to do that, but sometimes that might be a little sketchy because you could come up on orders to get sent somewhere else, and now you got to figure out what to do with this house, either rent it out or sell it. So that gets a little bit kind of sketchy, but some people, want to take that risk, or some people may want to use that as an investment opportunity and then rent it out. But if you don't get a place on post, then you're going to need to get a place off post. So how does that get paid for? Well, you get what is called BAH, that is basic allowance for housing. That depends on your rank and your location, because they're gonna kind of calculate based on what the average median is for that area to kind of help determine, how much they should be paying you extra to be able to afford rent if you're gonna live off post. Also, if you're a higher ranking individual, well, they're gonna pay you more, so that way you get a little bit more luxurious living in a way, but compared to a lower enlisted soldier, they might get something a little bit less that may have to get them to just a basic apartment. So that BAH for housing, you also receive BAS for food, but that's mainly for the soldier. But those two benefits as a married soldier, that's not taxed. The only thing that's taxed is your base pay. That's the pay that's based on your rank, right? If you are a married soldier as a E4, E5, E3, whatever the case is, that base pay is what's getting taxed. And then if you're married, you're also receiving that housing and that food allowance, and those two, the housing and food allowance, is not taxed. Now, if you do want to live on post and there is availability on post to live in on-post housing, you don't receive that BAH. So you're not gonna get that housing allowance because you're already being provided with a place to live that, is basically rent-free. You don't have to pay utilities. You don't have to pay for trash pickup or any of that kind of stuff either. So you're not gonna receive those benefits because you don't need it, right? But you do receive those benefits for that housing allowance to live off post, because you're gonna need that money to pay rent and pay your utilities. I will say that living on post does have a lot of restrictions with it. It's kind of like a kind of strict HOA type of neighborhood type of thing, where you got to make sure you're keeping your lawn cut and you can't leave the trash cans out. You can't have some junky car sitting out front and all sorts of other things, right? If you do not cut your grass or have trash in the front yard and leaving kids' toys all over the place, for the public to see, you could possibly get a little bit of a fine from like the housing department and stuff. But it is kind of strict with on-post housing, but some people like the convenience of being very close to work to get to PT and everything, and just having to not worry about having to pay a landlord. So of course, married soldiers are able to have their spouses at their duty assignment, but not in every case. There are some places where you might get stationed where it's called an unaccompanied assignment, or you may have some other kind of terms for it, but basically that means that you can't have your spouse with you. A common one that I've seen that with is like Korea. Sometimes Korea does allow spouses, but sometimes it doesn't, right? It depends on where you're getting located there, how long you're going to be stationed in Korea. For the most part, usually I've seen like soldiers that are going to be stationed in Korea for only 1 year are not allowed to bring their spouses, but soldiers that are maybe going to be spending 2 years maybe in Korea will be able to bring their spouses. So that depends, right? There are pretty much every assignment in the United States that you can have your spouse, but some overseas assignments will not allow you to have your spouse with you. If let's say you get stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, and you're there for 2 years, 4 years, whatever, and then you get orders to have to be sent to another installation. Maybe it's within the United States, like you have to go to Fort Bliss, Texas, right? You are able to have your family come with you. The only time you're not allowed to have your family come with you is if you're getting sent to one of those overseas locations, and then your spouse can simply stay where they're at if they wish to do so, or if they want to go back home to be closer to other family members, they can do that if they wish to do so as well. But if you're a married soldier and you're going to the field, you're going to a training deployment, a combat deployment, can't bring your spouse with you. So you gotta suck it up. You gotta be without them for that time period, whatever that field problem is, whatever that deployment is, whatever the case is, can't bring your spouse with you for those type of situations. So now going back to, like, let's say that scenario of you have to change duty assignments, right? You have to go from Fort Riley, Kansas to Fort Bliss, Texas. Well, the Army will move your household goods for you. You actually have a couple of options. You can either have them move it for you, or they will come, they will have these movers show up to your place and box everything up for you and then ship it off to wherever you need to go to next, and then make arrangements for them to drop it off when you get there, make an appointment, and they'll drop it off and unbox it, or not really unbox it, but put the boxes where you need them to go inside of whichever room. You also have the other option to move it yourself, and then the Army pays you, whatever they need to pay you to be able to do so. So they'll pay you extra so you can rent a shipping container or a moving truck or whatever, the gas it's gonna cost you to drive that truck from one location to the next, all that kind of stuff. And if you work it properly, sometimes people even make a little bit of a profit off of moving themselves without having to rely on the Army to ship everything for them. That is also the case even for overseas too. So they have the options to be able to move your household goods from, your stateside location overseas, or overseas back to the United States when you get sent back. Even when you're new in the Army and you want to have them ship your household goods from your home of where you came from, to your new duty assignment, they also do that. And they will also ship your stuff back. Let's say you get out of the Army and you're getting out of the Army, let's say in Fort Riley, Kansas, and you want to move back to Texas. Well, they will even ship your stuff to wherever it is you're moving to when you get out of the Army, back to Texas or wherever you're from. Now, in a situation where you have to go to the field, you have to go to deployment, or you have to go somewhere where you're not allowed to have your spouse with you, the Army does have to pay you for separation pay. They do have the family separation allowance that the Army will pay if you are away from your spouse for 30 consecutive days. If you are away from that spouse for 30 consecutive days, that starts off at about $250 per month. That is also not taxed, right? So you're gonna receive that $250 for every 30 days, and each 30 days after that you're away from your spouse, you'll continue to receive that, and it's not taxed. But again, it has to be 30, not close enough, 29, no, it's gotta be 30 or more. I have seen times where units will try to avoid that, right? Especially like with the National Training Center, soldiers go off to the National Training Center, and that's usually a month-long training, but sometimes they'll try to send the married soldiers back home first to try to avoid that 30-day time period, and maybe it ends up being 28 days, 29 days, boom, it's not 30, so they don't have to put in the paperwork for separation pay, they don't qualify for separation pay, so they don't have to go through the process of doing that. There are also some advantages and disadvantages to being married in the United States Army. I mean, one example is FRG, the Family Readiness Group. For some individuals it sucks because you go and you get off work, and then there may be an FRG meeting coming up on a certain day, and they're like, hey, all married soldiers, you got to attend this FRG thing with your spouse, and they can't really force your spouse to go, but they can force you to go, and you got to show up at this thing that kind of gives out some information about maybe we're going on this deployment, and here's some resources for your spouse while you're gone, and all that kind of stuff, and it's required for married soldiers to go. I mean, it's good information, but sometimes it kind of sucks. You're tired from the day and you want to go home, and now you got to show up at this extra thing, this extra event, and go to this FRG meeting. And like I said, great information probably, but sometimes it kind of sucks, and sometimes that may be a disadvantage for married soldiers. There's probably other advantages and disadvantages to being married in the United States Army, and those are my veterans out there that are watching this video that maybe are currently in the Army and married, or maybe some veterans that got out of the Army that were married. Leave me some comments down in the comment section down below. What are some other things you can think of that are maybe some advantages or maybe some disadvantages to being married in the United States Army? And then if you are someone who maybe is going to be joining the Army as a married soldier, or maybe you think that you could possibly get married while serving in the Army, and you got some questions, drop those in the comment section down below as well, and I'll try my best to answer the ones that I can, and maybe some of my fellow viewers can help me out and answer your question for you. Also, if you want to get yourself a Chaos t-shirt, I got some t-shirts down on the link in the description box down below for the merch store, or visit ChristopherChaos.com and go to the store. And I understand if you're married and you got to ask your spouse for permission, that's cool, I get it, but if you're like, screw you, man, I do what I want to do, I manage my own finances, well then let's see it. Show some support. Buy a Chaos t-shirt if you wish. But hey, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for sticking around for the video. Thanks for watching it. Make sure you're giving it a thumbs up. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya. Now, if you want to see that video that I was talking about single soldiers in the United States Army, if I already made it, it's on screen right now. If I have not made it yet, well, then YouTube's recommending a video for you that's just right for you. So check them out.